Lord, we love you. We thank you that we could be watchmen on the wall. God, you are faithful, and we thank you for everyone on this call. And Lord, I do pray for protection on the watchmen, protection on the intercessors. Lord, angels round about them. Lord, that there would be healing where healing is needed, breakthrough financially where that is needed, or for family members, for all things from your hand that, Lord, sustain us. So I pray that blessing on every one of these intercessors, faithful people. God bless them for blessing Israel. We pray that remind you of your own word. So do it. Thank you. Thank you, Lord. Okay, just a couple minutes. I wanted to share, it was actually Mark that got me onto this. And I just want to show you the fact this will be great for the young adults to also see, but the fact that five nations had pulled out of the Eurovision because an Israeli was allowed to play. I feel, and I'm so sad to see that the Netherlands was one of those nations. And then there's no surprise to Spain and Ireland. Iceland was a bit of a shock too, Slovenia, whatever. But the Netherlands, I was disappointed. But this, I'll put it in the chat again. This is actually, I mean, don't mind the dancers. I think they're actually quite talented. But this guy, it's going so far. Okay, why I say that is to think about an Israeli in the Eurovision, five nations boycott because he's in it, and now he's going to the final. I was like, isn't that just like God? Just turn stuff around, every time that people try to rise up against then the Lord, I don't know. I just pray that, that the Lord will be glorified somehow, some way for this guy who's obviously not a believer, but it's not a bad song either. Okay, we're going to continue the intercession for the Shabbat tonight, right? First ever credible that a president has called a Shabbat in a nation. Starting at sundown, let's honor that. Let's also pray for all the gathering in Washington. The lineup is amazing, and just wanted to mention that the fact that they have, I can pull up the schedule, but the fact that they have the supernatural in on Sunday, I think it's epic because what they're doing is they're really giving time for the past of supernatural happenings in America, as well as what's happening now as far as the supernatural and that looking to the future. So that's where they have like Abigail Robertson. She has a program called When Heaven Meets Earth, and she's part of that, as well as other pastors and leaders. Just looking for the detailed one. But anyways, just to say, I think that's great. And in the prayer meeting that we have in our home every Thursday evening, we were praying into that and saying, God, let there be more supernatural that happens throughout in America, even after Sunday, because they're giving attention to honoring and praying into the supernatural. So that's fantastic. So good
Amen.
stuff is happening. Last thing I'll mention is that President Herzog, he's made a call to the nation of Israel to get united. And I appreciate that. He just says, look, I'm so weary of where our nation has been not united, because that's been our big problem. And I thought, well, somebody's finally, because that was a big issue right before October 7th. So anyways, so we have kind of dropped it. At least I haven't really been thinking about it as much, but that is a big prayer request for the nation of Israel, is unity, because then you get the Psalm 133 commanded blessing. Alrighty, but we have a very special day. Sharon, thank you so much. And I'm going to just go ahead and highlight you, and I can highlight Dakota too, but you are our guest today. Yay, you're on here all the time and you're our guest. So really happy to have you and your grandson, Dakota. So please it's over to you.
Thank you. Well, this is a special day. This is Dakota Cavin, my grandson. I've also got another another grandson on that's a Gen Zer. If you see Caleb on here, he's on here too.
Great.
Um, but you know what? I invited Dakota on here because he's got a real passion for talking to Gen Z. He's really excited today because he doesn't get to talk to a pro-Israel crowd very often. He's mostly debating people that are not pro-Israel. So he's really excited to talk to y'all. The main goal of him and why we wanted him to come on today is that he wants to give you an understanding of what's going on with Gen Z and where the contempt is coming from. And the idea that he's going to try and convey today is to give insight on where the polarizations are coming from, why they feel this way, and how we can combat them, and how you can talk to Gen Zers, whether it's just people or your children or your grandchildren. So, Dakota, start us off with an introduction, a little bit of who you are and how you came to be in the place that you're at right now.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. My name is Dakota Cavin, and I have been pretty heavily involved with politics, honestly, since I was 16-ish. And it's been a fascinating development in my ideology, and that I started out in quite a polarized and emotional position. Being a younger person, you're kind of swayed by everything you see naturally. And so being having an opportunity to be on Instagram or on X or Twitter, you're constantly given short form content, which is by its nature shallow, by its nature quite shallow. And so when you're given shallow content, your ideology will immediately be considered shallow because you don't have introspection. And so I didn't come to this conclusion up until honestly last year because I myself found myself in a continued, honestly, just a very, very deep echo chamber. And that's kind of what I want to get across to you guys today, which is that's generally where a lot of the sentiment comes from is just a echo chamber and a sort of continuation of the same thesis over and over and over again, void of any cross-examination. And so, I was in that echo chamber for honestly a year and a half-ish. And, I remember we would have conversations, Gigi, and it would be like, I would bring up, oh, but don't almost all corporations, which is a very nuanced point, almost all corporations are only owned by Jews, and this is how we know that the Jews run the world or something. And I would tackle these arguments and say, well, this is it. This is how we know they are taking over our nation, or they're eating us from the inside out. And I was never challenged on that ideology, which is why I held it for so long. And so kind of what I'm wanting to get across to you guys is the psychology of the person, at least in my generation, who is very emotional and very motivated on this topic and more so an anti-Semitic perspective. And I think I offer a unique perspective because I used to be in that boat. I used to be in that camp. So I'm kind of like a defector in some way. And a lot of the times you're just getting folks who are attacking from the outside, but I'm attacking from the inside, who is now on the outside, if that makes sense. So that's kind of a short summary.
Yeah. So, we have challenged Dakota's thinking for quite a while now. Uh, Even back in his senior year of high school, we challenged him to he had to write a senior thesis, and we challenged him to write it on why Christians should support Israel, which kind of started the pathway, wouldn't you say, Dakota?
I think talking with Heather was one of the biggest catalysts. So
Yes. We set up an interview with Heather, and they talked for about an hour, and if it was incredible. And so we want to just kind of today, like you being in Gen Z, why do you think sentiment online is so negative towards Israel? And does that belief, does it reflect the average belief in Gen Z towards Israel?
To your first question, it's multifaceted because again, this is a horseshoe theory problem. You find this on the left and on the right, this polarization against Israel. And I think the reason we see this unified hatred is because Jews inherently, as it has been proven for thousands of years, are an easily identifiable people group, and they are easily as identifiable for assimilation or the opposite, meaning they can separate them immediately because of maybe their physical traits or maybe because of their behavioral issues, whatever it might be in that perspective, it's easily identifiable. And the left and the right have no problem with it, which is the concept of scapegoating, which we all know. And so I think the reason why it's so prominent on the left and the right is because it's so reactive. And it has been for, again, thousands of years, all the way back from the Canaanites or from Egypt, all the way up to today with the French in the 17th century to today in the 21st century. And so, it's an easily identifiable people group. And they have a heritage that is honestly older than our nation, obviously, largely older than, I guess, if you want to call it Christianity to a degree, with this kind of nuance with that point. The point is, they are easily identifiable, which means they're easily scapegoated, which means they are easily marginalized. And so, having this nature is very convenient for an empire who might have problems that they don't want to blame on themselves, so they blame on someone else. And because the Jews are inherently a marginalized people, they have been forced for thousands of years to survive. It's the concept of the path of least resistance. The Jews are constantly in a path of resistance. And so they are forced into places of high academics or places of, high finance because they're just trying to survive. And it's like that, especially for the medieval ages. But to your second point, yeah, I mean, it's tough because as it has been for, at least with Gen Z, it's not like that totally. There's a lot of people, at least on the political group. I think the numbers are 75% of Gen Z sympathize more with Palestinians than Israelis. But that's just for the voting class, which by 2028 will be 50% of the whole voting total for this next election. So it's a very important statistic. But I think overall for regular Gen Z people, there isn't much emotional, at least tangible motivations on their end. But for the political, I think it is quite prominent just because everyone is in love with their algorithm. That's the fundamental thing you can come back to. Everyone is in love with their algorithm. And so it's just what does the algorithm give them? What is the recurring theme in their algorithm? And if they're political, almost not all the time, but generally it's going to be an anti-Israel sentiment, which is why I think it's very helpful for us to know that simply questioning, sort of exercising a Socratic or Aristotelian methodology or device, we're able to just keep asking questions, leading questions that force them to come to conclusions they've never concluded themselves, which is like, okay, so why do you think Jews run the world? Well, I think X. Okay, well, why do you think X? Well, and then it keeps going. And you come to find out their ideology is as deep as a 15-second Instagram reel. That's it. And so, I think it's fascinating because everyone's so motivated and so emotional. But you start asking questions, things start to crumple quite fast.
So that kind of explains it. What do you think is the process a person goes through to get radicalized and so hateful towards the Jews in Israel from the lens of Gen Z?
Um, I think it largely has to do with social approval and communal approval. If you're given into a political movement, either be on the right or the left, who kind of beholds this rising up against a people group, in this example being the Jews, you're kind of celebrated if you're able to bring in more provocative material. And it's just a recursive loop. You're just going to keep giving more critical and, frankly, just graphic material. And it's more so a battle of who can be the most potent in their words, who can provide the most sort of, again, provocative terminology, if that's even a term. It's fundamentally who can make the most people offended. That's all it really is. And when you're tragically, when you're in this closed loop of continued polarization and continued, just frankly, rabid thinking, it only gets worse. And that's apparent for the left and the right. And because our algorithm and because our consumption of media and technology sort of beholds this type of continued devolvement, it makes no excuse for political ideology, which is the problem. It's like someone hooked on drugs. They want to get the next crazy drug, then the next crazy drug, then the next. And our algorithm is actively doing that just ideologically. And so I think it really can be boiled down to what we are consuming. And Gen Z loves to consume short form content. We don't read, we don't really watch long form material. We're really just watching things that are short, things that are instant, and things that give us an immediate dopaminergic reaction. And that is a very, very heavy flaw in our thinking. Despite us living in the 21st century, we really do just give ourselves the short end of the stick. And it really is hurting us overall. And so it can really be blamed on our social media pages. But I think there is a deeper thing going on that's spiritual. But I do think it's heavily, heavily to do with our tribal and obsessive communal degradation of, frankly, just polarization in general. Who can make the most people mad? That's really the game they're playing. And so that's what Gen Z cares about. And it's a very, very big tragedy.
Okay, so you're talking to a lot of people that are not Gen Z here this morning.
Sure.
So, how can we successfully change the minds of people who have fallen into this anti-Semitic sentiment? What's give us some really good meaty points that whether it's talking to your next door neighbor that may be Gen Z, children, grandchildren, what give us some points.
I think the first one that I love utilizing myself is, for one, honestly, exercising a classical approach to debate. That's the first one. Because if you play their game of emotional, just screaming, you're not going to get a deep conversation. You're going to go nowhere. And so you have to first establish to the person you're arguing with that this is going to be a mature, just devoid of any childish ambition, a mature conversation that is going to be predicated on definitions of terms, um, mention and understanding of fallacies. If we're not taking these first considerations, the conversation goes nowhere. So we have to first establish that. But second, hear them out and listen to what they have to say. That's the first one, because all they want to do is be heard. After they scream and yell or whatever they want to say, begin asking them questions. Say, okay, well, what brought you to this conclusion? And again, like I said a second ago, after you ask this enough times, you begin to find that it's more so just off of this recursive loop. They don't have any deep tenets in their ideology. And so what I do personally is I first ask them questions, as Jesus did. That's what he did. He didn't really try and make people mad. He just asked them questions and let them come to the conclusions themselves. And so ask them questions, say, okay, why do you think this way? What brought you to this conclusion? And um, frankly, after asking enough, they come to the conclusion themselves without you ever even having to say anything. And, let's just say, for an example, people saying, oh, well, don't you know, this is a common argument right now. The claim that the Holocaust didn't happen, and if it did, it was only under 300,000 Jews that died. This is a common one online. I like to ask them, okay, well, what brought you to this number of 271,000 people? That's what they say. Only 271,000 people died. That's the argument. I say, okay, where did you get that argument from? They can't tell you is the problem. But I do know where their argument comes from. And this is why you have to be well read. It comes from an Arlson document from 1944, specifically defining this number as in the title itself in German. It says this number is not to be taken as the overarching number for the whole death, for all deaths in the Holocaust. And all it is just a transcript of what they have recorded. And this is, just after World War II, or, just off the heels of it ending. They admit themselves that this is not the final total. They don't know that. Gen Z doesn't know that. They just know what's funny and they just know what's offending people. So they keep saying it. Oh, 271,000. It's all that died. Just introspection is what they don't have. And so I like to bring up, say, okay, well, do you know what you're referencing? They're like, well, no, it's just a meme online. You show them what they're referencing and then they kind of have to block you or something, whatever it is. But it's shallow. It's so shallow, but they're loud. It's like, not to be too blunt, it's like the leftists to a degree. They're just loud and they're emotional and they're polarized. And so that's kind of what I'd say to that. Just ask them questions because if you look at the material yourself, you can be quite confident that it's generally either totally false or there is some truth to it, but it misses the bigger picture. The word verisimilitude is what comes to mind whenever I talk about this, which is there is some truth in what they're saying, but they're missing the bigger picture, which is the 271. Yes, they did count 271, but what was their updated? This is by the Red Cross. What did the Red Cross say years after? Oh, well, now they're concluding in 1/6. Like they don't continue to read. They have the verisimilitude aspect, but they miss the rest of the picture. And so that's the nature of it. It's just this propaganda that's continued. It's like a fable. It's really just a fable and superstition. What is convicting? What is angering? And how can we make sure no one ever looks at the details? That's the game they're playing. And it's your job as the adults naturally to say, hey, I'm going to play the game of introspection and deduction to determine if your words are true. And they don't play that game, which is why you guys have the advantage. You have the wisdom, you're an adult. You people have the heavy wisdom, in fact, and you can say your emotions are noted, but your conclusions are shallow. And let me explain to you why this detail is so explicitly missed in your ideology. So that's kind of it. You guys have the wisdom and you can say what's true and what's false because you care about it. You don't have the problem of emotional motivation. You have the power and the maturity to say, let's slow down. Let's look at what the evidence is. That's what gives you guys the advantage in contrast to my generation.
That's amazing. Um, so we're about out of time. I want to conclude with Dakota works for JH Israel, and he's pretty soon going to be going back over there soon as Heather and Iran give the word that it's safe for him to go back over there. What is your challenge over there when you get over there? What do you find over there, and how can we be praying for you?
Um, I'd say just frankly, it's such a mixed bag because I love to be in Birmingham and be with the family, but I also love to get things done in Israel and feed into the Israeli people because there are people that are quite devoid and they don't understand what's going on in the US. And so just pray for more closer relationships for me with them because I've had a couple and they've been so fascinated by who even Christ is. They've never had someone really explain who Jesus is. And I think that's the biggest one. Just pray for me to have more personal relationships with people over there. That's a big one. They're honest people. They call themselves the 51st state. You know, they're very westernized. They just don't really know what exactly a loving image of Christ is. That's really, I think, would be the biggest one.
Okay. I think that you found they were very open to you,
Mm,
correct?
very open. Yeah.
Yeah. They asked him a lot of questions, even our trainers. So that was amazing. Patricia, do you have any other questions for Dakota?
Yeah, gosh, that was so, so good. We need to do this more often. Thank you. Literally, really, it was eye-opening in so many ways because I'm like, how do you get into the minds of the Gen Zs like this? I wanted to ask you what baffles me is, but I think you gave understanding to that. Like, if I think about, I don't want to, sometimes I don't want to bring up their names, but I'm going to bring up their names, like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes. To me, it's shocking that anybody follows them because it's so, so out of left field. But I think what you explained helps us understand that. It's because whatever kind of rallies the offense, that's really what you say. Do you have any comments on those three? Because as I understand it, they really have a lot of young people follow them. And to us, it's like, what in the world? Yeah, help us understand.
Especially on X, especially on Instagram or TikTok. The winner of these social media platforms is who can post the most interactive content. Who can play the game of provocation? That's all it is. And so people posting relatively mundane but true statements or deep research on something, those are generally dismissed. You find so many professors, even in, Ivy Leagues, who have like 500 followers, but then you have some, 28-year-old guy who's never had a girlfriend who gets popular because he says the N-word a lot. All of a sudden, he gets millions of followers. It's
Wow.
just the game of attention economy. That's all it is. That's all X is. That's all these social media platforms are. It's just attention economy. And so that's exactly why. So one of the people in the chat mentioned Hassan Piker. That's his game too. It's just a game of who can say the most offensive things. And
Wow.
it's a shame, but that's just where our culture is.
Well,
Now
go
tell
ahead.
us about Nick Fuentes. You said he was gonna change his political party the other day. Told me that.
Yeah, his theme behind that is he's still on the right, but when he says he wants to be a Democrat or move to the Democrat Party, he's saying that because he wants to tear apart the Conservative Party.
Right,
That's his
right.
intention. So he wants to pull the voter base, which he has a pretty heavy Gen Z voter base to a degree, at least for him, to the left. Because he says, okay, people on the right, because you guys don't like our anti-Israel sentiment, we're going to go with the left because they're more anti-Israel. That's really the game they're playing. And so he wants to destroy the right so that he can rebuild the right, is kind of his thinking.
Wow. Sometimes it makes us wonder, like, if there's a follow the money thing, right? Like,
Mm.
where are they getting their money from? But anyways, this is super helpful though. Yes, because though that has kind of for us who just want truth, we don't. Anyways, it has kind of stunned us, but this has been super, super good. What I would like to do is have you launch in prayer, and then we're going to pray. And then I'd like to save 8 minutes, everybody, at the end, because today is also the day in commemoration of the reunification of of Jerusalem. So the 1967 war. Today is the day of the, Jerusalem coming under Israeli leadership, which was very epic, of course. But we're going to save that to the end. And meanwhile, please, let's go for prayer. You launch us, Dakota, and thank you so much. Like, I'm like, wow, that was super helpful. I homeschooled my kids, so they all love Israel. But, I'm
The
just
big one too.
looking,
Your education's really big.
yeah, I'm looking at the rest of the world thinking, what the heck's going on? But you go, you launch us.
Lord, thank